So our first speaker for today is Dr. Yanina Pesh. Dr. Yanina Yasmin Pesh is the current president of the University of British Columbia Postdoc Association for 2020 to 2021. She previously served as VP Communications for UBC PDA in 2019-2020. Dr. Pesh finished her PhD in developmental biology at the universities of Bonn and Leipzig, Germany in 2017, and then moved to Vancouver, Canada for her postdoctoral research at the University of British Columbia. Dr. Pesh is working in the Department of Cellular and Physiological Sciences at the UBC Faculty of Medicine, and her research is focusing on stem cells in Drosophila fruit flies. So welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So with that, I'll try and share my screen. I think you have to make me a co-host so that I'm able to share my screen because I don't have the permission right now.
Okay. Let me.
I can try again, but it says host disabled screen sharing.
Is there someone who can help me out? I can't get it to pop.
Oh yes, sure, Chris. If you find the name of Yanina, then if you click on the more, then you will see that make host a co-host. There is a option as make co-host. And if you cannot find the name of Yanina, you can just search her name on the find the participant bar in the right side, and either you or Nushin can do that, I guess.
Yeah, I'm also trying. Give me 1 second. I think I found you.
Okay, so you should be a co-host now.
Okay, then let me try again.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, perfect.
Hey, so that seems to work. Great. So hi everyone, I'm Yanina. I'm the president of the UBC PDA, and it's a pleasure for me to introduce the UBC PDA to you today. So just a little bit about postdocs at UBC. So there's around 900 postdocs at UBC, but that also includes around 100 postdocs at the UBC Okanagan, but they are represented by their own newly established PDA. And as you can see in the diagram on the bottom right, most of our postdocs are either in medicine or in sciences, so that makes up the vast majority of them, and there's only few in the arts. And out of those 900 postdocs at UBC, we're reaching around 700 that have subscribed to our mailing list. And as you can see in this picture, the UBC campus is absolutely stunning. Vancouver is a great place to live, but it's also very expensive, which makes it very challenging for postdocs. And the mission of our PDA is to make sure that every postdoc has their best possible experience at UBC. And for that, our main goals are professional development, offering social activities, and doing advocacy. For professional development, we're hosting a couple of events each year where postdocs have the opportunity to share their research, network with each other, and we are also hosting an annual career night. And prior to COVID, we were hosting a lot of in-person social activities where postdocs could meet each other. And for example, this week for Postdoc Appreciation Week, we are hosting an in-person socially distanced ice cream social, but we also have some virtual events. Then for advocacy, we're making sure that the needs of postdocs at UBC are met by the Postdoctoral Fellows Office, which we're closely working together with. And we're also trying to represent postdocs' interests provincially and nationally. And for example, now during COVID, we launched a Covert Survey similar to the one that CAPS has launched. And we wanted to make sure that we cover all the aspects of the pandemic that postdocs at UBC might be struggling with so that we could address it to UBC administration. And then, So we're basically reaching all the postdocs at UBC via our social media accounts. So we are very active on Twitter. And we also have our blog, blogs.ubc.ca, if you're curious. And we're sending out monthly newsletters and other emails when there's job opportunities in Vancouver for postdocs, or if there's some of our events coming up. This is our executive committee. As you can see this year, it's all females in our elected positions. And we also have a bunch of non-elected executive members. And within the PDA, we're organized into subcommittees. So it's always a couple of people responsible for organizing one of the events, and then a couple of other people responsible for organizing some other events. And we're the liaison between the postdocs and the postdoctoral fellows office. That's part of the UBC administration. And we are also collaborating with the Life Sciences Center because that's where most of the postdocs at UBC are working. Then a little bit about our big annual events. So each year in December, we're hosting the Postdoc Research Day, and these are pictures from a couple of years ago. This year, the Research Day is going virtual due to COVID. And at Research Day, we have a bunch of postdoc speakers that are presenting their research findings, and we are making sure that postdocs from all areas of research are represented and not just the ones from medicine or sciences. And in addition to the talks by postdocs, we are having a keynote speaker, and we are also hosting career panels. Then we are also offering the 3-minute postdoc slam in summer, where postdocs present their research in a single static slide in 3 minutes, and there's prizes for the winners. And also we are hosting keynote speakers from science communication. And this year, the 3-minute postdoc slam in July was our first large virtual event. And it was a great success because we had the same number of attendees, but looking at their demographics, it was more postdocs, because in the previous years when we were hosting the in-person event and were handing out pizza and sushi, a lot of undergrads and graduate students accompanied the postdocs from their labs. So this year it was very, very successful, and we didn't have participants just from UBC, but also from several universities across the US, and we even had people from Norway attending. So that was absolutely great. And then we are hosting an annual career night, and this is a picture from this year's career night, which was in early March, so right before the pandemic was hitting. And as you can see, people were already jokingly drinking Corona, and we had mandatory hand sanitizer at the entrance. And for our career night, the goal is for postdocs to connect with potential employers, and for postdocs to just see what industry professionals in Vancouver are doing and how they are hiring. And it's basically a great networking opportunity. And then these are pictures from our social activities prior to COVID. So each year the PDA would organize a skiing weekend in Whistler. We would organize hikes, restaurant visits, beach barbecues, brewery crawls, and so on. And of course, we had to adapt that now during COVID. So what worked really well for us is hosting trivia nights. They are usually really, really well attended. But what wasn't that successful are games nights and movie nights. So we're still trying to figure out what works in the virtual world. But we have also recently started hosting new socially distant outdoor activities, and they seem to be really popular. So we had a socially distant picnic, which was nice, and then we're hosting an ice cream social for Postdoc Appreciation Week, and all the slots were booked out within hours, so there seems to be a great demand. And in addition, because trivia was so successful, we're gonna host that again. And we are also hosting some mental health seminars in November, because that's when life in Vancouver is absolutely gloomy and terrible. So because of all the rain, it's definitely good to have some mental health seminars in that time. And then in the second part of my talk, I'll briefly show you the results of our Covert survey. So as I already briefly mentioned, similar to CAPS, we launched a survey about the pandemic situation for postdocs at UBC, and we had around 200 participants, and the survey was running in May and June. And at UBC, most people who are doing wet lab research started a phased-in return to lab in late June. So this was really when people were still at home, and indeed the vast majority of people who were answering our survey were working remotely, and for a lot of them, their research had been completely interrupted. And despite of that, most postdocs were either extremely satisfied or somewhat satisfied with the communication by UBC and with the supervision and the overall level of support received. But of course, there were also some concerns that were popping up all the time. So for about 20% of postdocs, me included, their immigration status had been affected, which caused a lot of anxiety. And then most postdocs were thinking that their fellowship should be extended because it's critical for their research output. But for a lot of them, this was actually not entirely sure if this could actually happen. And about 50% of postdocs were reporting the inability to secure a job during this difficult time, which I think is quite striking. And there were also some UBC-specific concerns popping up, like lack of childcare, which seemed to be a big deal for postdocs with kids. And then because rentals in Vancouver are so expensive that no postdoc has the money to rent an apartment with a separate home office, those who are working from home were complaining about not having enough space for that and not having the proper office setup. And for example, for grad students at UBC, there's a lot of grants for technology, such as buying a new laptop. Stuff like that is not easily available for postdocs. So that was one of the problems. And then people were quite anxious about how are they getting back to work, like because most postdocs are taking public transport or might even fall into the high risk category. And so far, we haven't heard many complaints about how the return to research is going, even though quite a few postdocs have returned to campus, but we are trying to launch another survey soon. And the things that we are doing to stay positive in the pandemic and also to stay relevant as an association is to post a lot of very positive social media posts, such as this picture on the right that says we're in this together, and that was very well received. So postdocs really seem to like those pictures that were kind of out of context, but it cheered them up. And we are hosting social activities such as postdoc coffee breaks or those very popular socially distant in-person events. And we're continuing to communicate with UBC administration about the COVID-related concerns. And with that, I'd like to thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to open up the floor to anyone who has questions about all of these amazing activities that are going on at the University of British Columbia. So maybe I'll start with a question that we've been wondering about at CAPS. And how is it that UBC has such a strong postdoc association and is able to engage postdocs in such a meaningful way?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I couldn't hear the first part of the question.
Sure. How is the postdoc association at UBC able to bring together the postdocs and have such an active presence on the UBC campus and with their postdocs?
So I'm not sure like how active our presence really is, because we have 700 subscribers to our mailing list, but we have basically the same 100 people that always show up to our events. But for those postdocs, it's very, very great to have our association, because for them, it's a great opportunity to connect and also meet other postdocs. And via social media and just trying to be very out there and just distributing notices about our events, we are trying to get more postdocs engaged. Like, for example, for our 3-minute slam, where a tweet went viral and we suddenly had a bunch of people from Norway attending our event.
What other questions do the postdocs in attendance have?
I see a question in the chat. So, are there any concerns that postdocs have expressed post-pandemic that's not addressed by the university or funding agencies? So I think in general, the working from home setup was a great problem that a lot of postdocs were complaining about, because I'd say a lot of postdocs are still working from home and will be for the foreseeable future. And there's no grants that help postdocs get, for example, a new desk or a new laptop, which would be crucial for working from home. Because some of the other major concerns like extension or fellowships and so on have actually been addressed by funding agencies. So I'd say that like those infrastructure problems are the ones that are unaddressed for now.
How is the association going about supporting postdocs in finding these things like laptops and desks and space?
So as we are just a volunteer organization with a very limited budget that has also been cut in half due to the pandemic, we can't actively contribute to any grants or so, but we can just help them provide with resources. Just like links where they can find support or address their specific questions. There's another question about the UBC Okanagan PDA. So the UBC Okanagan PDA just had their first elections a couple of weeks ago. So they are a brand new organization. And they are also trying to work together with us as the UBC Vancouver PDA to establish themselves. But the number of postdocs in the Okanagan is rising very, very dramatically. So it's good that they are going to have their own PDA.
You'd also mentioned in your talk that the majority of the postdocs in the association are more from the physical and medical biosciences. How are you trying to reach out to postdocs, say in the arts and the humanities and the social sciences?
So, for example, at Postdoc Research Day, we're trying to actively highlight the talks by people who are not in sciences so that their work is actively promoted. And then periodically we try to reach out to the postdocs in arts and try to engage them actively.
It's one of the challenges that we face at CAPS too. So we're also looking to our membership to see the different strategies that they use. That's very useful. I'm curious for the participants. One thing that Dr. Pesh mentioned was that you regularly get, what was it, 100 people?
100, 150.
So I'm just curious in the chat if you can write your institution and the number of postdocs that come out to the events at your institution.
Okay, sure.
I'm not seeing too many responses. Oh, maybe. At the University of Victoria, a maximum of 10. Max Planck 200 to 300. Wow.
I mean, for us, it also really depends on the events that we're hosting. Like for those large events like Postdoc Research Day or the 3-minute slam, we're getting those around 100 participants. But for socials, we usually get like 15 to 20.
So at Ryerson, we have 20 plus. At Carleton, 20 to 30 out of 140 postdocs. Do you know how it compares at the University of Waterloo, around 50? Do you know if these numbers are similar to what you would see in graduate studies?
I don't know.
So Ed just was writing, I had the experience at Dalhousie, the maximum number we experienced was 45 for our research day. So it's sounding like if it's a research focused event, there are more postdocs who are coming out as compared to the social oriented events. And at the University of Waterloo, grad students count is much bigger. And I'm assuming this is Université de Montréal. Not sure if we have any. So yes, at the Université de Montréal. And I'm trying to think, at the University of Toronto, there were some events, but they weren't particularly well attended. So it tended to be more by department or by institute. Okay, so at a Queen's event, about 20 to 50. What other questions do we have from the audience for our speaker? So I had another question about how you're doing your longer term planning as a postdoctoral association, taking into account the longer term strategic objectives of the Postdoctoral Association with the immediate needs of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. What are some of the strategies that the association is using?
So for our longer term planning, we basically have those recurring events that we're hosting every year. So we're just trying to move them into the virtual world this year, and at the same time try to answer the needs of postdocs at the moment. Like for example, this ice cream social was booked out immediately because we limited the number of participants. So because that has been so well received, we are trying to just host similar events, even though that's going to be very difficult with the winter coming up and COVID probably getting worse. But we're just seeing what the input is to see where we can do. Like, for example, a lot of postdocs have gotten back to us and said that they would like to have more in-person events, even though the pandemic is still going on. And then another long-term goal is to host more seminars that postdocs would appreciate, like about jobs and applying for jobs or about mental health. And that's something we're working together with the SFU PDA on.
Okay. Now would these events be virtual and perhaps be opened up to postdocs in other parts of the country?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So the events that you're organizing, those are specific for postdocs?
Yeah, so for the larger events, we usually also have a few grad students and undergrads attending. But now that more stuff is virtual, we see more postdocs in the audience because we had a lot of grad students accompanying their supervising postdocs and so on at our previous events.
One of the challenges that came up in the 2020 national survey that CAPS did was that a lot of the trainings that postdocs do are not specific to postdocs. So postdocs, they have some very particular needs, but their trainings are often lumped in with graduate students or more general university-wide ones. So having activities that are specifically geared to postdocs can be very important. And it would be wonderful if postdocs at some of the smaller institutions could piggyback on some of these excellent activities that are going on at the University of British Columbia.
So for that, I also have to highlight our Postdoctoral Fellows Office because they are hosting a lot of professional development workshops for postdocs, which are absolutely free, and they are also geared towards postdocs. And a few of them are also in collaboration with MyTex, and those are also definitely helpful.
Okay. Now, if a postdoc listening to this session wants to tap into some of these trainings, how would they go about doing that?
So I think most of those that are hosted by the Postdoctoral Fellows Office are only for postdocs at UBC, because when you register, you have to give them your employee ID and so on. But a few of the MyTex workshops, for example, are also hosted Canada-wide or at different institutions. So I'd say the MyTex homepage is a great resource. And of course, if like the UBC PDA is hosting different workshops, basically everyone can attend because we are not restricting ourselves to just UBC.
Okay. I think it would be helpful if you could just put the UBC PDA website in the chat and people can bookmark it if they want more information.
Okay, I'll do that.
What other questions do we have from our audience?
Oh, I had a question from Janina. Thank you very much for your talk. I believe that postdocs at UBC are categorized as faculty. Is that correct?
So it basically depends on, it's a yes and no answer that I can give you. So we don't have the same benefits that faculty has. And for a lot of those, we're considered as employees or as fellowship holders. But for some stuff, we're considered as faculty. Like for my UBC gym membership, I'm paying the faculty price, but I'm not getting the faculty benefits. So I'd say mostly we're considered as employees.
Oh, okay. Well, the reason that I asked it, you kind of answered my next question. I was wondering that what's the advantage of being like the faculty or not? But as you said, there are partially like the beneficial, like for postdocs as faculty. Thank you.
For example, faculty members at UBC get a discount on faculty housing. And for that, postdocs are not considered as faculty. So postdocs don't get the same discount.
Oh, okay.
So what benefits are there to being classified as faculty?
Like those discounts for housing and like the availability of all the on-campus heavily discounted housing, and in general, I'd say, I mean, the health benefits for postdocs at UBC are pretty good, even if we are considered as employees, but there's definitely some benefits that faculty members have, which postdocs at UBC don't have. I don't know the exact details, but yeah, there's definitely some minor differences.
Okay. Did any of those benefits change during the pandemic? Because one of the things that we've been hearing from Canadian postdocs is because of their different statuses, their access to benefits has changed during the pandemic.
So for us, that actually wasn't the case. I'm not aware of anything. But for example, because a lot of postdocs, but I'm thinking that's a Canada-wide problem, had issues with their immigration status and were on implied status for quite a while, they lost their MSP membership. So that definitely caused some problems for some individuals, but I think that has been mostly resolved.
So we're nearing the end of our first session. So if anyone has a final question or comment for Dr. Pesh, I would suggest you write it in the postdoc or unmute yourself and you can ask her.
Okay, thanks for having me today.
Well, thank you very much for joining us and letting us know about some of the different activities and approaches of the UBC Postdoctoral Association. Thank you very much. So we have a minute or two where you can get up and grab a coffee or a glass of water before we go into our next session on grant writing. All right, so we're going to move on to our second session for today. We have Guillaume Beaulieu-Hull and Amy Reckling, who will be presenting on grant writing. So they're from NSERC. And for any of you who have been following the topics that are of most interest to Canadian postdocs, grant or proposal writing was the training topic of greatest interest to Canadian postdocs, with 62% of over 1,117 postdocs saying this was really important to them, and it's an issue that's come up several times when we're talking about our 5 asks to the Tri-Council. So this should be a very popular topic.
Okay, thank you. Well, hello everyone. My name is Amy Reckling. I'm a program officer in the Scholarships and Fellowships Division at NSERC. Guillaume, did you want to introduce yourself as well?
Hello everyone, my name is Guillaume Beaulieu and I'm also a program officer at NSERC, but I work with the research grants portfolio.
Yeah, quick initial note. So while today's session is going to take place primarily in English, please feel free to ask questions in the official language of your choice. N'hésitez pas à communiquer avec nous dans la langue officielle de votre choix. I'm just going to share my screen with everyone. So what we're going to do is as program officers to present sort of a very brief overview of the programs that we have here at NSERC available to postdocs and researchers. There we go. And so I'll provide a very brief overview of tips and advice for writing applications for postdocs, for the postdoctoral fellowship program, and then Guillaume will move on to talk about the Discovery Grants program at NSERC. We're going to try and be as brief as possible to leave some time for questions. We know we have only 30 minutes for this session, so apologies if I'm talking a bit fast. Please feel free to follow up with us at our emails. I'll put that into the chat once I finish presenting at any point after the session. So I'll do some important informational videos, a program overview, program updates that would be notable to PDF applicants this year, as well as some advice and tips for writing a strong application. And I'll try to spend most of the time that I have on that last portion, because I know that's probably what people are most interested in. In my opinion, this is probably the most useful slide that I'll present to you today. So this year, program officers in the Scholarships and Fellowship Division have created a series of informational videos, which we've posted onto YouTube. So these are very detailed. They incorporate a lot of the most common questions that we receive from PDF applicants and cover everything from program information to a step-by-step walkthrough of the online system tutorial, program and COVID-19 updates relevant to applicants to this year's competition, as well as EDI information. And again, that advice and tips for writing a strong research proposal. This is the overview of our program. I won't spend too much time here. What I really want to point out is just two things to keep in mind. One, just a note that foreign citizens are not eligible to apply to the NSERC PDF program. So you would be eligible to apply to the Banting PDF program. So if you are a foreign citizen and looking for funding opportunities, take a look at that program. The second is that we often get the question of what date is the date on which your PhD degree requirements are met, and that is typically the date on which you submit the final corrected version of your PhD thesis. These are the eligibility criteria for the PDF award, again, available online. Two things to point out here. Oh, sorry, I messed up my notes for that slide. So again, yeah, foreign citizens not eligible to apply for the PDF award. I covered what the PhD degree requirements are. Note that in order to take up your award abroad, you must have completed your PhD at a Canadian institution. So if you are planning to apply to the PDF program and want to go to a different country, you do have to have completed a PhD in Canada. And also, if you're planning to hold the award, a brief note that you can't hold that award in either an industrial lab or a Canadian federal government lab. Moving on to some program updates. So there are two that I think are relevant to applicants to the PDF program this year. First is that there is a new diversity module which has been added to the Form 201 online application. This will ask you whether diversity considerations, including but not limited to sex and gender, if those were taken into account in the research design, methods, analysis, and interpretation and/or dissemination of findings. So it's a pretty short section overall. If you answer yes to this question, the expectation is that those considerations will be incorporated into your research proposal. So ensure that if you answer yes, that you do that. If you answer no, there's a text box provided where you can briefly explain why these considerations are not relevant to your work. So this is, if it's not applicable to your research, this is nothing to be stressed out about. You just need to have a brief explanation as to why it's not applicable. What we're trying to do here is to really get you thinking about whether these considerations might be applicable to your research when maybe you thought that they weren't. So we do have some EDI resources that are linked in our application instructions that I encourage you to take a look at. Also to watch, again, the YouTube videos online, which go into a lot more detail about this. Take a look, consider it in the lens of what might be applicable to your research. And at the end of the day, if your decision is that nothing is applicable, then just answer no and provide that brief explanation. Second, effective fall 2020, NSERC has removed the once per lifetime application limit from the PDF program. So provided you continue to meet all program eligibility requirements, you can apply to the program more than once. COVID-19 update. So I know that's probably been a popular topic in the PAW week. Today's session, specifically for both the scholarships and fellowships, or the fellowships and the DG portion, we're looking at addressing how these might be relevant to current year applicants. So if you are a current award holder and you're wondering, or you have questions about how this will affect current award holders, so things like interruptions and extensions, please reach out to our general email inboxes. Also, we've been regularly posting program updates online on our webpage and tweeting and posting about them in social media. So you can keep an eye there or follow up with me after the presentation. Specifically for this year's competition, if your research has been disrupted or delayed due to COVID-19, you should use the special circumstances section in Form 201, so your online application form, to explain briefly what has been delayed or disrupted in either your research program, the research progress, things like that. So don't be shy to use the section. We are anticipating that, given that this is a global pandemic, that most applicants to the program this year will have had some amount of delay or disruption to their research progress in some manner or another. So please make sure to just include a brief explanation there to provide some context to reviewers on how this pandemic has affected you. Moving into advice and tips. So for the PDF program, these are our basic but important tips on what to do before and during the application process. So be sure to read the program description, the application instructions, and especially the selection committee guide. This is a publicly available document and is actually what we provide to reviewers for the PDF program to guide them in how to evaluate applications. So I would keep that open as you prepare your application or when you're reviewing it, just to make sure that you're hitting on all the points that we're asking reviewers to keep an eye out for as they evaluate applications. And again, a reminder to watch the resource videos, which are available on our YouTube channel. I'll post a link to that in the chat as well once this presentation is over. So for the PDF program, you have a 2-page attachment for your research proposal, which must include references and citations. A note, this is a common question. The accepted shorthand notation for your field to use as your references is totally fine for the research proposal. We see that every year, so you don't have to include the full reference. Shorthand notation is just fine. The other boxes on this slide sort of go over some of the key things and points that reviewers typically look for in a strong research proposal. So the first is to write the proposal yourself, which I guess probably seems pretty obvious, but it shouldn't be an excerpt from a discovery grant proposal. The idea and the writing must be done by you. It is totally fine to have somebody look over your proposal and to provide advice on maybe how you can strengthen it, but the main composition and the idea need to come from you. Explain the significance of your project. So again, context is key here. What is the impact going to be on the scientific community, and how is your research going to provide new knowledge to the field? Providing this context can really help to place your research in a way that makes it exciting and interesting and understandable to the people who are reviewing it. So it's very important to explain the significance of your project. Make the proposal clear for reviewers. Write your application for a general audience of scientists in your field. For the PDF program, it's important to remember that at the national competition level, your application will be reviewed by a selection committee that has a broad range of expertise within your area. So while one reviewer may be an expert in your particular field or your particular area of expertise, it is very unlikely that all 3 people reviewing and scoring your application are going to be experts in your area. So write in clear, plain language, try to avoid any jargon that's very niche to your area of expertise, just so it's understandable and accessible to reviewers. For the PDF program, part of what you're evaluated on is your communication skills, and part of that is the ability to communicate a scientific idea to a broad range of scientists within your area. Describe EDI considerations in your research plan if applicable. Again, I covered that a bit in the diversity module, and we do go into a bit more detail in the videos that are available on our YouTube channel, but just keep in mind that at the end of the day, we are trying to fund research that is the strongest research possible. And so studies that take all potential variables and end users into account typically lead to research that is more ethically sound, rigorous, and useful, and will be of more benefit to the broader scientific community. Finally, make sure that your research proposal conveys your passion. It is very clear when reading a proposal if you're interested and excited about the idea that you're talking about, or if you're feeling very blasé and not that excited about it. And so while two proposals might be able to have an equivalent impact on the scientific community, the one that's going to stick out more to reviewers and make them excited about the work that you're doing is the one that conveys the passion and the enthusiasm that you feel for that work. So try to keep that in mind when you're writing your application. So the Freeform contributions and statements section of the PDF application is made up of 3 parts, which can be a maximum of 4 pages. I won't go over everything in all the points on this slide, but I do have some tips that I wanted to provide on this section for anyone who's planning to apply this year. So watch out for repetitiveness among sections, and this probably applies to grants as well, but yeah, repeating the same information over and over when your application has a limited amount of space isn't maximizing the strength of your proposal. So try to avoid repetitiveness as much as possible. In part 1 of the contributions and statements, keep in mind that you cannot list articles that are in preparation, only those which have been submitted, accepted, published. So, you know, if you've done a conference presentation, you can include that in the non-peer-reviewed portion of part 1. That leads into the next point that I wanted to bring up. So in part 2, describing your most significant contributions to research. Part 1, you can list both peer-reviewed and non-peer-reviewed contributions. So if you think that 2 of the papers you've listed are your most significant contributions, but the 3rd one isn't quite as significant as one of your conference presentations, it's totally fine to elaborate on the conference presentation instead. A brief note on part 1 again, if you had an abstract for an oral or poster presentation accepted to a conference that was canceled due to COVID-19, we would recommend that you still list that there in part 1 as a contribution, just with a bracket at the end saying canceled due to COVID-19. You only have 4 pages for this section. It's possible that you might not be able to fit all of your achievements and accomplishments into that section. If that's the case for you, I recommend that you select a subset of the information that will really provide a snapshot to reviewers of the breadth and variety of your work and experience, and also let your references know of anything that you weren't able to include, as they may be able to incorporate that into their report on the applicant. So really maximizing the space that you have within the application to communicate as much information as possible. Finally, keep in mind that listed accomplishments don't all have to be science related. So things like coaching a soccer team or volunteering within the community, they could still be leadership indicators for the PDF program, even though they're not specific to the scientific field. I just have a few general notes on references. Invite them early. If you are planning to apply and you haven't invited a reference yet, as soon as you log out from this session, contact them as soon as possible, because it takes a long time to write a good reference letter, and these are an important component of your application. Set a soft deadline with them. I would recommend at least a week in advance, because you have to remember that if both of your references have not submitted their letters, you will be unable to submit your application. So if they don't submit their letters until the day of the deadline, an hour before the deadline, and then our system crashes or something like that, or it has a lot of traffic on it on the deadline date and you're submitting at the last minute and you miss the deadline, we're pretty strict with that policy. So, you know, make sure that things are submitted in advance just to avoid any potential headache there. These applications take a long time to write. So I would not recommend waiting till the last minute to submit. And again, provide background information to your references. So, you know, they're going to know you very well, but they probably don't have a comprehensive list of everything that you've done that they keep on their desktop. So if you provide them with a list of things that you've done, accomplishments and achievements, and that gives them something to work with that they can reference as they're making your report on the applicant, which will allow them to describe not only the things that you've done within their lab or when you've been working with them, but your broader accomplishments and achievements as well, which typically successful applications, those are what the references talk about. So they don't just talk about the work that you've done with them specifically, they talk about you as a whole, like who are you outside of their lab and within their lab. This slide notes some common errors and mistakes that we've observed program officers and reviewers over the number of years that we've been administering this program. It does touch on some points that we already touched on. So impact not explained. Your research should be presented within the context of your field. And the potential scientific impact should be explained. So make sure that the impact is clear when you're reviewing your proposal. Again, repetitiveness, A well-crafted, non-repetitive application package demonstrates strong communication skills, so avoid repetitiveness among the different sections of the application. Missing or irrelevant citations, so either missing key citations from your research proposal or providing too many irrelevant citations doesn't usually bode well for the evaluation of your research knowledge. A lack of focus. Again, this comes back to explaining the impact and placing within the context of the field, but a strong research proposal is cohesive and has a clear goal. Applications that are written too generally aren't typically scored very strongly just because it's difficult for the reviewers to understand what it is that you're trying to do and what the goal of your research is and what the impact of that research is. Spelling or grammatical mistakes. Strongly recommend that you have a peer or colleague look over your entire application for spelling and grammar errors. By the time you submit an application to either any of our programs, you're going to have looked at it so many times that spelling mistakes such as on versus no that aren't going to be caught by the word spell checker, you'll read right past them. That's just the way that brains work, but they're going to stick out to reviewers very clearly. Because you're competing against such high level top tier fellows from across the country, it's very important to ensure that your application is as strong as possible. And part of that is ensuring that it is grammatically correct. And finally, don't be too modest. Make your application stand out by highlighting your accomplishments and achievements and giving them the heft that they deserve. This isn't the time to underplay the things that you've done. Everyone has done notable achievements and has accomplished really cool things. We see these applications every year. But if you have two applications side by side that have the same content and one person is really highlighting those achievements and talking them up really well and explaining why they're important, and the other person, the tone is different and they're sort of underplaying the value of that, then the person who is selling the application better is probably going to get a higher score. So just, think about it as though you're reading a friend's application, and then make your changes in a way that you would explain to a friend of yours how to make their application stand out and how to get it to the top of the pack. This is just general contact information for the scholarships division, as well as for our online services help desk and the link to the YouTube channel. I'll probably send a PDF version of these slides to the organizers after the conference, just so they can be distributed as well. And I'll post some of these links in the chat as well. Thank you. Guillaume, over to you.
Yes, I'm just going to share my screen and we'll go for part 2. Okay, you should see my screen. Yes, okay, good. So Amy talked about the PDF application. I work with the Discovery Grant program. Discovery Grant is a flagship program for the Grants division. And I know that most of the audience today is either PDF or senior graduate students. So you're not eligible for this program just yet, but it's often one of the first grants that you're going to apply to when you start your independent research career. So the goal of the Discovery Grants program is to support programs of research in the natural sciences or engineering in Canada. There's a couple of very interesting things about this grant compared to a lot of grants that you're probably going to apply for. This one, for example, is extremely flexible. So you're not bound by the content of the application. So what you propose in your application, you're allowed to go in any direction that best fits you once you're hold the award. Also, this is not a salary award, it's for direct cost of research. So that's equipment, chemicals, and also to provide stipend or support for your trainees. They are individual awards, so it's not about creating collaboration with people and submitting one package together. It's one award by independent academic researchers, and you can only hold one at a time. But you hold one for 5 years. So it tries to provide long-term support to the community. Change slide, there you go. So what are reviewers looking for when they evaluate a Discovery Grant application? So we have 3 criteria, and they're equally weighted: the excellence of the researcher, the merit of the proposal, in the contribution to training of highly qualified personnel. For each of the criteria, we use a 6-point scale from insufficient to exceptional. And something also that's very different from a lot of other funding opportunities out there is that the amount of money that the grant, that you receive with the grant is not linked to how much money you're asking. So in many funding opportunities, you're asking for, I need $150,000 to do this specific project, and this is my budget, and this is how I'm going to spend it. In the case of discovery grants, we use those 3 criteria to evaluate the quality of the grant and not the need for a fund. And what we do then is that each grant within one evaluation group, so within one discipline, physics, chemistry, whatever, all the grants of similar quality, all the applications of similar qualities will offer the same amount of money per year for 5 years. Discovery grants also try to broadly support the research community in Canada. So the award are more modest than in some other agencies, but the success rates are quite high, and we offer awards for over 5 years. So in the case of early career researchers, so early career researchers in the context of discovery grants, it's you're an early career researchers for the first 5 years following your first independent academic appointment. So that means when you become a professor, you have professor-like duties. So for early career researcher, last year we had a success rate of 61% with an average grant of $29,000 per year for 5 years. Early career researchers also have the opportunity to extend their grant to a 6th year with fund at that level if they want more time before reapplying for their subsequent discovery grant. So what are reviewers looking for? I'll go over the 3 criteria briefly. The first one is called excellence of the researcher. And what the reviewers are asked to evaluate is your past contributions to the natural sciences and engineering only in the last 6 years. So one advice for those of you who are on the verge of natural sciences and maybe health or natural sciences and social sciences is to really showcase and tailor the description of your accomplishments to the value or the contribution that it brought to the natural sciences and engineering. Applicants are looking for to evaluate your knowledge, your expertise, and your experience in the field, again, only within the last 6 years. The second part is the proposal. The discovery grant proposal is quite short. It's compared to other or for the length of the grant. So it's only 5 pages with 2 pages of references. And as I mentioned, you have 5 pages for 5 years or for at least a program of research that lasts at least 5 years. And we encourage you to actually explore goals that cannot be achieved in 5 years. So we're looking for research questions that are long-term, that will keep you busy for at least 5 years, but are even broader than that. So like many proposals, evaluation group members are looking for originality, innovation, contributions that can come out of the grant that are significant to the community, be clear, have objectives that are broad in scope, and an appropriate methodology. And again, what's interesting here is that you might think that the proposal is the most important part of your application, but it is extremely important. But it's 1/3 of the proposal. And yes, we want to encourage bold ideas and everything, but focusing only on the proposal part is not a recipe for success in the context of discovery grant. Because in part, 1/3, the final third of the evaluation is about your contribution to the training of highly qualified personnel. So training is something training the next generation of scientists through those discovery grants is something that's very important for NSERC. So what's evaluated in the contribution to HQP? Let me first define what HQP is. So it's highly qualified personnel, and an HQP is anyone that is trained in a research environment. So it can be undergrad students, grad students, postdocs, research associates, Even if you're training people in industry, in a research environment, those count as HQPs. So in this part of the applications, you're asked to highlight your past contributions to the training of HQPs and to make plans for the future. There's considerations implemented in the program that for early care researchers, early care researchers haven't had the same opportunity to train or to train at the same level as established researchers. So the past contributions to training are expected to be more moderate for early care researchers than they are for established researchers. However, what's very important is, well, everything's very important, but the future training plan is very important for early care researchers because it showcases how you plan to train those students and what impact you want to bring for the future generation. Starting last year, also we renewed our focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion in the training plan. So now during your application, you're asked to identify barriers to equity, diversity, and inclusion in the research environment. Those barriers can be specific to your discipline, your university, your region of the country, but you are asked to identify those barriers that makes it more difficult for underrepresented group to have access to training, and to identify measures that can be put in place or that you commit to make the research enterprise more diverse and inclusive. So most of the tips I have echo what Amy said. At that level, usually you're something that postdocs might be less. So at the research grants level, I think the universities put more resources in helping researchers get those grants. So once you're an independent academic researcher, you have access to the research grant office of your university. Some universities are very involved in the process and help the researchers exhaustively. Some universities have databases of previous applications from their university that past applicants have agreed to share with the next generation of researchers to help them build the best application they can. So if that's accessible for you, I definitely recommend reading past successful applications. The research office is a great resource. The Discovery Grants peer review system is, again, a peer review system that is ingrained in the Canadian university system. So all universities in Canada have members that are reviewing on panels or that have reviewed on panels before. So seeking mentorship for them is definitely a good idea. Planning ahead and checking a social deadline. The process for Discovery Grants is a bit more exhaustive. You need to submit in August a notification of intent to apply with a short summary and keywords and possible external reviewers. And then a couple of months later, by August 1st, is when you submit your full package. But by August 1st, it's not you that submit your full package, it's the university. So everything needs to be validated through the university. So universities have internal deadlines that are usually a couple of weeks before our deadline. So make sure you respect them, because your research grant office can help you with those applications, but ultimately they're the ones who are sending them to us. And then the one resource that I wish all applicants of Discovery Grants would read is the peer review manual. Like Amy said, for Discovery Grant, it's a publicly available document. It contains all the knowledge that NSERC gives to the reviewers to tell them this is how you apply or criteria. This is what you should value. This is the pitfalls or the traps that you want to avoid. So that's the one document that I would highly suggest you to read before starting your application. Just to wrap up this section, I think grants writing is an interesting process, and you'll get lots of advice from different people. A lot of it is similar: be clear, be precise, have interesting ideas. But tailoring your application to what the specific funding opportunity, I think, is often the key to success. it's very easy to see, especially in research grants, when we receive an application that was previously submitted for a different opportunity that is more project-based. Because then it's going to be very precise, it's going to be like very experimental details, which is not what we're looking for in this case, because again, 5 pages, 5 years, you don't go down in the weeds. So understanding the funding opportunity, understanding what the agency or what the administrator of the funding opportunity want, I think is the key to success. Science and the description of your science is extremely important, and the originality of your idea, but also take a bit about it as almost like an exam or like a research paper or document you need to do that it's going to be evaluated, rather than just this is the science I'm proposing. Of course, we also have lots of resources online. We have webinars and videos. Just before I wrap up and we open the floor to questions, I was asked to show you this slide. So NSERC is frequently hiring. Many program officers like me and Amy were graduate students or postdocs. So if you're interested, there should be a pool, an application process opening soon for program officer positions, which is what Amy and I are, and it's a good entry point for both postdocs or senior graduate students. So we invite you to look at our career website at the bottom of the page, and we expect to have a process opening very, very soon. So with that, thank you very much for your time. Amy and I are going to be happy to answer any questions you might have in the offshore language of your choice.
Thank you very much. That was very informative, and I'm very glad that we had a chance to record that, because I think that it'll be a very popular session for postdocs who aren't able to attend this session live. So we have a few minutes before the next session. So I would invite you to unmute your microphones and ask your questions to Amy and Guillaume.
Oh, I just would start out. There's one question in the chat that I didn't answer by text, but it was asking if the grant numbers have changed post-pandemic. We're not specifically involved with the budgeting for the program, so can't speak to that. I haven't heard of any budget changes. For PDF, I don't believe that there have been any injections into that program for the coming year. But keep an eye on program updates on our webpage. Any new budgetary announcements relating to that should be announced there. If it's, yeah.
And Christine, I'm not sure about SSHRC and CIHR, but I believe they also use the Government of Canada general page to advertise jobs. So that's why I would look.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. It was very helpful. My question is about the discovery grant that you discussed. So in terms of eligibility criteria, and to the best of my knowledge, if you do not have like the 3 years contract or something like that, you are not eligible as a postdoc to apply, or you should be either a tenure track faculty or a contract position with at least 3 years. So my question is that, well, does it technically work for postdocs? Because most of the NSERC postdocs and the other type of like the grant agencies who do hold different like the grants, it's not more than 2 years, at least to begin with. They might be renewed for 1 more year or 2 more years afterward. But I'm wondering that with this condition, do you see any applicant from postdocs who apply for this like the grant discovery, or it's all about the faculties?
It's all about faculties, really. Like I didn't dive into eligibility, but you need to be in an NSERC eligible position. And usually in the Canadian context, it means, well, we only give grants to Canadians too. It's like to Canadian institutions. But yeah, it needs to be usually like a professor at university, tenure or non-tenure track. But yes, it needs to be a 3-year contract. You need to be able to direct your own research, to supervise students, and I'm missing one criteria. But yes, it's not for postdoc, it's really for eligible faculty. But we wanted to give you a taste of what was the next program that you'll be applying
Oh,
for.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. That was very interesting. Just to wrap it up, so you mean that if I am a postdoc with 3 years contract, still I'm not eligible to apply because I'm not the PI of the project, right?
Exactly. Like you need to be able to direct research and supervise students formally. And as far as I'm aware, postdocs are usually not able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, thank you for your great presentations. I have a question about, also along with Edris's question, eligibility of grants for older postdocs, so like senior postdocs who have already gone through a couple years of training and are now ready to become more of an independent investigator. How would they go about applying?
Until you're like a faculty in an eligible position, discovery grants is not really an option for you. So I think that's a gap that is identified between the requirement for a fellowship, a PDF, and a discovery grant. But right now I'm not aware of a program that would fit that need of postdoc who've had a couple years since their PhD.
Great, thank you.
And just as a follow-up to that question, does NSERC have anything in the pipeline where they're looking at creating other grants that postdocs could be eligible to apply for?
The last couple of years, there's been a strong focus on early care researchers, usually in the faculty context. But yes, like the discussion of how to support the transition from PDF to faculty is there. I cannot commit to a new program or anything really right now. But I can tell you that's something that is at the both at the Trigens level and within NSERC, like we recognize that this is a zone that might be underserved right now.
Yeah, just to ease any worries that you might have, the discussions are definitely happening there, but nothing concrete.
Yeah, concrete. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
That sounds great. I'm not sure if you had a chance to attend our Monday afternoon session where Dr. Emma Griffiths was presenting our top 5 asks to the Tri-Council, and the need for postdocs to be able to apply to a wider variety of grants as the principal investigator is one of the main areas of advocacy that CAPS is working towards now.
Amy and I weren't there, but I know that the document has been already circulated within the agency.
I was going to say, I did see the document this morning with the 5 top asks as well, although I wasn't at the session yesterday.
Okay, excellent. Well, we've used up a lot of your time. Thank you so much for being a part of Postdoc Appreciation Week. We really appreciate all of the support that we get from the Tri-Council and that the Tri-Council offers to postdocs. So thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thanks for hosting it.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
So our next session will be moving to the University of Waterloo. And we have Dr. Angela Rook and Dr. Jeff Casello from the, I'm not sure if it's the University of Waterloo Post-Doctoral Association or Post-Doctoral Union. So I will turn it over to you.
Do you want to start, Andrew?
Sure. Thanks, Christine. I'll just clarify that we're both with Graduate Studies and Postdoctoral Affairs. The University of Waterloo doesn't have a postdoc association or postdoc union at this time, but I'll just get my screen share set up if I can. It looks like the host hasn't enabled participant screen sharing. So if there's a way you could get that set up for me, Christine, I'd appreciate it. There we go. Thank you.
Been granted great authority, Ange, so use
yes,
it.
I will try. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yeah, we can see them.
Perfect.
Okay.
So I will pass it to you, Jeff.
All right, thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. And first of all, let me say, I hope all of you are enjoying Postdoc Appreciation Week. We certainly have been thrilled to recognize our postdocs here at the University of Waterloo. We have about 400 or so at any time. And really, we recognize the value that the community provides, not just in terms of research and scholarship, but also just as a part of an increasingly diverse and important part of our community in teaching research and the community as a whole. So I really do want to say thanks for all postdocs do and let you know that we at the University of Waterloo appreciate our postdocs, as I think all of our partner institutions do. So I'm going to speak just for a few minutes about the structure of postdocs at Waterloo and how we manage the situation, and provide some insights, I hope, and then I'll be happy to turn things over to Angela, who will, as she described it yesterday, as we talked a little bit about this, I'll give the nuts and bolts and she can talk about the fun things. So that's what Angela will do next, and then we'll be certainly available to take some questions. So at Waterloo, a postdoc occupies, I think, an awkward space, and this is actually something we're trying to address. Typically, our postdocs are contract employees. They're not staff, they're not faculty, and of course, they're not students. And so they sort of live in this amorphous space in between those three definitions. And when you look at our Waterloo policies, there are some places where postdocs are explicitly treated as equivalent to faculty members, other places where they're treated equivalent to students in terms of, for example, ancillary services. So recreation and things like bus passes are the direction we'd like to go, so that our postdocs have the same access to those supports as our students do. So we're really working to clarify those things, and Angela and I have been part of a multi-year project where we've been working with our postdocs and with the centers and institutes to really try to articulate those desired outcomes for postdocs, and then work through our policies and our guidelines on a sort of one-by-one basis to identify the places where it's in the postdoc's best interest to be identified as one of those categories. And so that work is continuing, although I just talked with Angela yesterday and we agreed we're going to try and get something done by the end of the year. So that's our goal. One thing that causes us a little bit of trouble, and probably this happens at other institutions, is our definition of postdoc. We understand it well. I think our postdoc community understands it well, but our faculty partners don't. And so we have postdocs who are at Waterloo who have been here for 20 years. And really, we define a postdoc internal to graduate studies and postdoctoral affairs as really a transitionary position for our institution. So you've recently finished your PhD. We define that as within 5 years. You're coming to Waterloo, or you're staying at Waterloo to help accelerate whatever elements of your career you want to accelerate. So this is intended to be a place where you get great support and you transition from being a doctoral student to being an independent academic or an independent researcher or an independent whatever that is you'd like to do after your postdoc experience. And so we've been working again with our colleagues, trying to establish definitions that we all agree on and trying to differentiate those who are working really as lifelong research scientists, research associates, rather than those who are truly transitionary in their postdoc position. What you're able to do as a postdoc at Waterloo is really up to you pretty much and your supervisor. So we are really now asking our postdocs when they're joining us to really talk through this with their supervisor, the things that they may want to do, particularly for our international postdocs, because whatever is in your contract at the time of your appointment, really that's what we're allowed to have you do while you're on campus. So we've been working closely again to get anything that the postdoc may wish to do while they're with us, to have that in their contract so that we don't ever run up against the problems where a postdoc's goal or their own agenda is limited by what we put in the contract. And of course, they work closely with a faculty member. I'm a little bit reluctant to use the term supervised. I know we do that, but I like to say we work collaboratively with because I do think we're moving postdocs to being independent and equal scholars with our faculty members. So I try to be careful with that language. And of course we pay you, which is probably a good outcome for everyone. And I will say that the university has been trying to tie its payment structures to tri-agency structures, but we're now, I think, lagging. So this is another issue that we've been looking for. Just to give a sense of the evolution of postdocs at the University of Waterloo, I've been in my role for about 4 years now, and it was a year after I was in my role that through Angela's advocacy and others, our office was at that time known as the Graduate Studies Office, and postdocs were really feeling this lack of connection with the university. And so collectively, the Provost's office with the deans decided that our name would change. And not only would our name change, but our focus would change to include postdocs explicitly. And so now the roles that we play are really intended to be consultative and supportive for our postdoctoral community. The postdocs are still appointed through faculty members and appointed through faculties and human resources. But our role really, as I said, is supportive and providing advice. And we often do advocacy as well. So when a faculty member might be considering the recruitment of a postdoctoral scholar, we will often be consulted about what kinds of terms should be in contracts and how long that contract should be, what that means in terms of benefits, those kinds of questions. Sorry, so we do quite a lot of that. When a postdoc is having any kind of challenges with their supervisor or their research group or with payment, we're typically the first group that they'll come to as a point of contact, and that really is Angela. And then if necessary, things get bumped up, and I'll try to intervene with my executive council partners in human resources or in finance or wherever that is best to be addressed. We have a communications team that looks after all of the comms with postdocs. So again, because of the way postdocs sometimes fall through cracks, we're always careful to make sure that our communications that are coming centrally from the university or from our office directly are translated into a very student-focused lens, but also into a postdoc lens. And so throughout Postdoc Appreciation Week, we've been making sure that we're reaching out directly to our postdocs, but also throughout the COVID experience, we've been trying to make sure that our postdocs are remaining current on what the university policies are. I think most importantly, again, we have 400 postdocs. We recognize the diversity of stages in life, family structure, age, scholarship, and so on. And given that diversity, there really is a dedicated effort from our office to create communities of scholars. And we do that through a number of ways. And particularly this week, there's a lot of evidence that we are engaging our postdocs. So really, we're trying to create some place where we balance the two sides of the postdoc equation. Certainly from a university, we recognize the scholarship and the impact of the scholarship of our postdocs. We recognize the teaching capacity. We recognize the mentoring capacity, those kinds of things. But we also recognize that postdocs will really value their time at Waterloo and will really gain the most in terms of their professional and personal development if they have a community to which they feel like they belong. And those are the balance that we're really trying to get to. And a lot of that is really the last two bullets on this slide is, or the third and fifth bullets on this slide, is really about making sure our guidelines and our structures are correct, but really creating an outreach and an awareness program for our postdocs to ensure that they feel recognized and that they are recognized and that there are opportunities for them to engage with the university community. So I think that's what you wanted me to cover, Ange, or was there one more slide for me?
Yeah, no, I think that's great.
Okay.
I can take it over and talk a little bit about the community that we have been building and some of the initiatives we have, as well as the resources that postdocs have access to here at the University of Waterloo. So I created this slide just to give you a sense of some of the many initiatives that we've had for postdocs at the University of Waterloo in the last couple of years. As you can see, we're always trying new things. We're very interested to hear from our postdocs on what it is that they're looking for. My team in GSPA oversees the postdoc experience as well as the grad student experience. And we try to make sure that where it makes sense, we bring postdocs into all of the programming that would be of interest to them that's also available to graduate students. But we also know that in many cases, postdocs are in a completely different place. And so we have created some tailored programming for them or worked with our campus partners to provide tailored programming for them. So certainly when it comes to things like immigration and immigration advice, that we have a dedicated staff person who can help with that. Same with services and resources fairs and teaching development. Those are some of the areas where we know postdocs are in a completely different place in their career than graduate students, and so they need some tailored resources. So we have secured that at the University of Waterloo. And we really just try to get postdocs and their families involved in the community. We've organized having postdocs bring their families to a Waterloo Warriors hockey game. We've arranged some trips to Niagara Falls in collaboration with another unit on campus. So, and we'd really try to get them involved in all of the other things where it makes sense that they might be interested. So University of Waterloo has, I think, one of the largest yearly staff conferences, and it's really geared towards people like me, staff members, but we were able to negotiate to allow postdocs to join as well, because it's a really crucial professional development experience for them. And we've organized non-academic career conferences and academic career conferences where postdocs are mainly the target for those two events, but we do allow PhD students to join as well. So this is just a small sample of some of the things that we've done in the last couple of years. I have some photos here. Jeff, you probably keep seeing your face. Jeff has been great in being an approachable face to our postdocs. Although I'm the main contact person, as he said, we often will loop Jeff in, especially if there's an issue, and he's been great at being a part of that postdoc community. So there's a picture here of Jeff at the picnic that we had in 2017, picture of our non-academic career conference that same year, and we almost always do a postdoc services and postdoc services fair along with a free lunch. We know that that's one thing that doesn't change when you go from grad school to becoming a postdoc, is the desire for free food. So we try to do that as much as we can. And this year we have, of course, Postdoc Appreciation Week. It has been a struggle to figure out some great programming in this virtual context, but I think we've done really well. So on Monday, we did a postdoc paint night where we hired a local artist to bring our postdocs through the very basics of watercolor painting through to, as you can see, creating some of their own masterpieces that they were all very proud of. And I was so impressed at the level of artistic talent we have in our postdoc community. We also had our president and vice chancellor, Feridun Hamdalapur, send a video to all of our postdocs through email, thanking them for their service. With Jeff's support, our president has been involved in Postdoc Appreciation Week, I think, for 3 years now. He and Jeff often, in normal years, serve postdocs lunch and liaise with them at least one of our Postdoc Appreciation Week's events. And because we couldn't do in person this year, Feridun was eager to send a video thanking them for their services and thanking them for all of their contributions to the community and to the research enterprise more generally. And yesterday we had a Making the Most of Your Postdoc panel discussion with several former postdocs now working in industry, in alternative academic careers, and as faculty members, just sort of giving advice for what they would have done differently as postdocs, sort of looking back and providing that advice to current postdocs. And that was another really well-received event that we did. And we've been giving these very popular t-shirts out to our postdocs. We've arranged with the on-campus W store to be handing these out to our postdocs throughout Postdoc Appreciation Week so they can go pick them up at any time that they want. We also have a virtual services fair that will be launching tomorrow. So postdocs, especially incoming postdocs, can really understand the resources they have available to them. As Jeff mentioned, they are in this kind of liminal space between faculty and student, and it's not often clear what resources and services they have access to, which is why this was so crucial. So the virtual services fair will include videos from our campus partners, information tailored to postdocs about why they might want to access this service or resource and what supports are available to them there. And I'm very excited. On Friday, we're having our first ever postdoc research communication competition. It's called Postdoc Lightning Talks, where we ask our postdocs to present. It's super casual, 1 to 3 minutes. It's sort of almost like a short commercial for their research and for a non-specialist audience. And so this is really our chance to bring postdocs together, potentially find some collaborations, hear about the other postdocs on campus and what their research is. And of course, they'll have a chance to win a cash prize, which also helps things along. And I'll just quickly highlight that at the University of Waterloo, postdocs have access to the same services as other contract employees. So as Jeff mentioned, they are classified as contract employees, even though they're not technically staff or faculty. They are contract employees, and as a result, they have access to all of those same services. So support from IST, staff conference, occupational health. They have access to lynda.com courses and so forth. And then through their extended health benefit plans, they do have access to counseling, though not at this time on-campus counseling. So that is something that Jeff and I are also looking into as we continue to advocate for more and better resources for our postdocs. But in addition to all of those services, our office has been able to work with our campus services to negotiate that postdocs have access to even more than regular contract staff do. So one of those services is they have access to a dedicated postdoc and grad student career advisor who's fully immersed in the sort of career development needs of our postdoc fellows. They also have access to a writing and communication center specialist who is dedicated to grads, postdocs, and faculty members, and actually has postdoc in her title, sort of making it clear that we are here for this community. The Center for Teaching Excellence does teaching development workshops. Our postdocs have access to one-on-one help with anything related to teaching development, whether that be micro teaching sessions, getting feedback on their teaching, developing their teaching philosophy statements. All of those are crucial things for getting an academic position. And as I mentioned before, immigration and visa support. We have a key contact person who supports our postdocs in those areas. And our office actually funds 2 lovely elderly people, one of whom is a retired professor from the University of Waterloo, and his wife, who actually lead postdoc English conversation classes. And these are really well received by our international postdocs, and they really appreciate that service as well. And I think that's about it for me. We're open to questions if there is time for some, and if you want to reach out to either Jeff or I, our emails are on here, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
I'll just jump in for 30 seconds more and just say that Angela's too modest to say, but she's just a remarkable resource for our postdocs. She's so well known amongst the postdoc community, and if we do have some colleagues on the call who are from UW, I'm sure that they're very familiar with Angela and her warmth and her welcoming and all of the academic and non-academic work that she and her team does to make our postdocs feel welcome. So I'm enormously grateful to have Angela on the team.
Thanks, Jeff.
That sounds great. So I've been taking lots of notes and I have a number of questions, but before I start with mine, I'd like to open the floor to everyone in attendance. Let's see what kind of questions you have.
I think I do recognize some names here from Waterloo, so no pressure, but.
Okay, so I'll get the ball rolling. Just on the last point that you had, Angela, about the different services that were offered to postdocs at the University of Waterloo, one that really stood out for me was the support that postdocs get if they want to improve their teaching. And that stands out partly because one of the results that came out of the national survey was that 39% of Canadian postdocs rated their postdoctoral training experience poor or very poor when it came to teaching. So they were very satisfied in other areas, but teaching was the one area where it was noted it was particularly poor. So the emphasis on teaching in developing postdocs is really great.
Yeah, thank you. I know we do hear from our postdocs that there is certainly a more desire to have the opportunity to teach more. I guess the difference, and so that probably exists across Canada, and I think that that's something that our office can't necessarily fix, but what we have been able to do is work with our Center for Teaching Excellence to arrange that they at minimum can attend the workshops and get that teaching development underway, even if they don't currently have a teaching contract. Jeff, I don't know if you want to say a few words about our Center for Teaching Excellence and how great they have been in this regard.
Yeah, they're really super, and we run a center for we give a certificate for university teaching, and there's a whole series of courses that our postdocs and students can get engaged in to achieve that certificate. So I guess not so much on really the mechanisms of how we do this, but one thing that I've been really trying to promote, and Angela as well, is just these initial conversations between our postdoctoral scholars and also PhDs when they come to join us, asking, what is it that you hope to accomplish in your time with us? And then really working with the scholar to put in place programs that allow them to do that. I think, as again, if we think of this as a transitioning period from your doctoral experience to your professional or personal objectives, it's so important to have the opportunity just to say, this is what I want to be able to do, and in the university find pathways to make that happen for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What other questions do the audience members have for our panelists?
Well, thank you very much for the interesting talk on the resources for the postdocs at the University of Waterloo. Well, it is more like a comment than a question for not necessarily postdocs at the University of Waterloo, for the entire postdocs across Canada. Well, the experience that I had, I think that one of the missing points for postdoc in terms of professional development that universities normally offer, and this is the missing point to my understanding, is to give them the chance to sitting in different committees, like supervising committees, that it is a great asset when you apply for different positions. If you know that, if the committee that are evaluating you, they know that you have this experience and you have done it before, that's a great help. Or even in writing grants, I know that to a great extent, it depends on the relationship of the postdoc and the supervisor. But if there is an extra push, I would say, from the university, which encourages the professors and the faculty members to take advantage of their postdocs in sitting in those committees, in writing the grants. I know that we had the talk from NSERC, and they said that there are some limitations in terms of eligibility criteria for postdocs and writing grants, but at least I think that there are some ways that their names can be included in writing the grants. So those are the things that I believe that it's a missing point for most of the postdocs across Canada. Again, I don't limit that to the University of Waterloo, but this is the comment that I had, and I think that it would be great to take it into account for future postdocs. Yeah.
So maybe I could say one thing, and then I think Angela will also want to say a couple of things. Edris, thanks for those comments. I agree completely with what you said. I was curious to listen in on the last bit of the NSERC conversation about whether or not postdocs would be able to hold their own research grants and apply directly, and I'm eager to see that happen. And I do think that there's plenty of evidence at Waterloo that postdocs are really taking the research lead on those kinds of things. And it is my understanding, and maybe Angela can correct this, but once a grant is held, a postdoc can be given signing authority on that grant, so that they're able to spend the money from the grant under their own purview rather than having their supervisor. But just on your first two comments, Edris, was the first was about having postdocs on committees, particularly supervisory committees, and that's something that we're making explicit at Waterloo, that we encourage that when a postdoc is able to contribute to a grad student's research. Certainly there's no obstacles. They can't be sole supervisors at Waterloo for, I think, obvious reasons because of the transient nature of the postdoc position, but they certainly can be co-supervisors with faculty members and certainly part of examining or advisory committees. And in terms of committee work at the university, we are now being asked to have postdocs be present at our Senate meetings and to represent the voice of postdocs at Senate. And that's a new change for us to have postdocs around the Senate table. So I'm excited to see those kinds of committee opportunities opening up for our postdocs, because I do think, as you said, being able to demonstrate your capacity in administration is also an important element if you're moving into an academic or non-academic position.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the information. Yeah.
I was just going to quickly add that I thought, Idris, your comment was timely, because actually Jeff and I just spoke yesterday about the question about postdocs serving on committees, and as Jeff said, there are no obstacles to that at the University of Waterloo. And so I chatted with Jeff yesterday because I want to make it more clear that that's the case, because I actually had a few postdocs from lab reach out to me a few weeks ago and say that, you know, in Europe, they actually have way more opportunities to get involved, especially in those more formal mentorship roles for graduate students. And they felt like that wasn't supported at the university. And so I clarified with Jeff that yes, in fact it is. And we're going to be working on sort of promoting that fact and making it more clear on our websites that that is the case.
And just one more very quick thing, because I know our colleague wants to get in, but I think that the importance of mentorship isn't growing when postdocs are looking for faculty positions or applying for things like banting. The ability to demonstrate your mentorship opportunities is increasingly important, so we recognize that.
Thank you very much.
Maybe Kristen, if I can jump in. So I'm Catherine Palasiski, and I work for NSERC. So I just give you also some opportunities to and encourage you as PDF to participate in the university committees, but also we are seeking for some of our programs participants for our selection committee. So we've been actively looking and working with CAPS to appoint or at least have names of potential people interested to participate in some of our advisory committee. We have one representative from the PDF community at the advisory group on Discovery Research, which advises our VP. So that was something that we tried this year to work with the association to seek some interest there. But also on our selection committee for the scholarship and fellowship division, we've been over the past few years seeking and appointing PDF on these committees. So there is a process on our website to self-nominate if you're interested in participate in those type of things. But I would encourage you also to reach out. We also have, you know, education process for the master and maybe some of the USRA awards that are giving out at the university. So knock on doors and look at the university who are responsible for those committees if you want to participate and if you're interested in those kind of opportunities.
Hi, I have a question. Actually, two questions. One is for Jeff. You mentioned earlier that you're trying to move away from the language of calling the postdoc supervisor a supervisor. I was wondering, by moving away from this language, would it end up undermining or underestimating the power dynamics that's between a postdoc and their supervisor? And I forgot my second question, so I'll let you answer that one first.
Sure, and of course, we recognize this relationship from master's students to graduate student to postdocs, really from senior faculty to junior faculty. We recognize that this relationship or this unfortunate disparity exists all the way through academics. And at Waterloo, we have a couple of ways that we deal with that. We have written a supervisory guide that is very explicit about starting with a very open conversation about many things as you enter into this kind of relationship, about, as I said earlier, about the goals that you want to achieve, the outcomes that you're trying to affect as the postdoc. We also strongly encourage you to articulate the intellectual property, if that's appropriate, as you come into these kinds of relationships. And really, the whole structure at Waterloo that we're trying to implement, and I'll be candid and say, you know, with varying levels of success, is really around establishing mutual expectations between you and the persons with whom you're going to work. And so moving away from the idea of a supervisor is really intended to break down that disparity or to address that power differential and ensure that the voices are felt and are heard commonly and the expectations are common. I know those sound like very lofty goals, and it will take time to change the culture and to change the overall practice. But this is something that I am regularly screaming from the rooftops, if you'll pardon the expression, and we are now embedding in more and more policy at the university. So we're optimistic. And I'll just say one last thing. On Friday, we have a workshop that is for supervisors, both PhD supervisors and postdoc supervisors. And Friday is the first of 2 full days where those supervisors get exposed to university policy, but more than anything else, get exposed to this philosophy and are asked to embrace it.
Thank you. I remember my second question, and it has to something that was touched upon earlier about how during COVID, a lot of postdocs are scrambling to set up a home office at home because some of us are not set up that way. I myself, for example, I've moved many times in the last couple of years because I'm postdocing. And so I don't have a home office. I don't have a monitor. I don't have a mouse at home. And all of a sudden we all have to work from home and there's no resources to support that. And perhaps this isn't just a question for Jeff and Andrea from Waterloo, but also for anybody from NSERC, is that I've noticed a lot of universities are now, or a lot of supervisors are expecting their grad students and postdocs to show up with their own computers, their own paper sometimes even. I know a couple of years ago, NSERC was not funding pens and paper because that's a part of, I guess, the agreement between the university and NSERC that, paper and pen isn't a part of what comes out of your NSERC money, but rather it comes out of the university budget or something. And I'm feeling like, I don't know if this is something that happens just to the universities that I've been to, or if at a university with a better postdoctoral association or office, are these issues addressed?
Well, I can only obviously talk about what's happening at Waterloo, but we do have what we're calling an academic readiness fund that is intended to support graduate students and I presume postdocs, although I'm not sure that we've had any postdocs apply, to ensure that they have connectivity to the university when we are operating in a remote environment. It doesn't extend to things like furniture, but certainly if you need a laptop, if you need headsets, if you need some equipment to operate remotely, there's a fund there for our students to have that access. So I certainly don't intend to defend universities or take a position. I mean, I think we all want to be as connected as we can be, but COVID has just been such a massive disruption that I think we're all just scrambling a little bit, and that's not meant to be an excuse. I think we're as we understand challenges that students and postdocs are facing, we're all working collectively to try and make sure that we can continue to provide super experiences despite being fully remote. So
you're describing this fund in terms of remote work. So was it explicitly set up for COVID-19? Because I guess I should have been more clear in saying that my question is more general, because before COVID-19, I've been to a number of universities as a postdoc, as a graduate student, and I've been expected to show up with my own laptop. And, like anybody else going into a job, into a workplace, you'd be given a computer. As a grad student, when I joined my lab, I had a desktop at the lab that was provided for me to do the research I need to do. And it seems rather silly that these things aren't provided to postdocs these days.
Again, just one quick comment, because I think everyone's situation differs, but I'd just say that these are the kinds of things I think that we would hope at Waterloo that a potential postdoc and their potential colleague would talk through before they came, and there would be clear expectations around how the postdoc would be supported.
So this is a really great point to leave with our Tri-Council representatives and our Postdoc Association representatives as something to work on. And I'll just bring it back to the national survey again, because what we've been told by Canadian postdocs is that making ends meet and salary is a huge issue. And I presented a couple slides on Monday showing the average postdoc salary and the average postdoc monthly expenses. And if you have dependents, if you live in Toronto or Vancouver, or some of the more expensive cities, all of your grant money is going to pay your basic expenses, so you don't have any left over to pay for a computer and pens and papers and all those other things. And these data were collected before the onset of the pandemic. So the pandemic is really just exacerbating a lot of the issues that postdocs have been facing over the years. And I just have one other note that I want to leave with all of you, and that's that it sounds like the University of Waterloo is having some great discussions internally about how to meet the different challenges that postdocs are facing, and have come up with some really innovative approaches. And it would be great to hear how the University of Waterloo and other institutions are discussing these together, so they can share their experiences and strategies, so the wheel doesn't have to be reinvented at all these different institutions. And there's also some continuity for the postdocs who, like Sherry, are going from one institution to another, so they know what to expect when they're going into these different positions.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just quickly mention that our team, and me particularly, we're involved in the Canadian Association for Postdoctoral Administrators. And so during COVID especially, we've been meeting monthly to share best practices, learn from one another, share information, and that's been pivotal in making sure that we're staying in the loop with each other and sharing that information. So we do have those things in place. As you can imagine, when it comes to things like policy and benefits, that can vary greatly province to province. And so we sort of have a more internal provincial system where we talk to those within Ontario in Waterloo's case. But certainly I think CAPA has been doing a great job in trying to streamline a lot of these things. And so I'll give that little shout out to them. So the structure does exist. I think we could certainly be doing better. And I think that's the hope that CAPA has in continuing these meetings going forward.
That sounds great. So that's a wonderful note to end on. So thank you very much to our speakers from the University of Waterloo. And our last, so there's a question in the chat about where we can get the slides and the recordings from the meetings. So all of these meetings, with a few exceptions, are being recorded, and they will be posted to the CAPS YouTube channel. And all members of the CAPS listserv will be receiving an email with a link to all of these recordings at the end of PAW. So keep checking your emails. So for our last panel for today, we're going to be talking about international postdoctoral fellowships. And for this, I'm going to invite Dr. Jennifer Major, the Vice Chair of Career Development at CAPS. Jen, you just need to unmute your mic.
Of course. That's like Zoom 101 now, and I failed. Okay, so thank you, Christine. As she said, my name is Jennifer Major, and I'm working with CAPS for the past year. I'm currently doing my postdoc at the University of Colorado in Denver, and I'm here with my husband and my daughter on visas. And so I guess the idea for this session was to give an idea to Canadian postdocs what it's like to be in another country doing a postdoc. And also on the flip side, which I'm guessing probably a lot of people are interested in as well, is what is it like to be an international who's in Canada doing a postdoc. I'll just start off by introducing our two panelists. So Dr. Myra Trenchins-Noda is a good friend of mine. We actually worked together in Ottawa while I was doing my PhD. And she was visiting from Brazil on an exchange while doing her PhD as well. She then went back to Brazil and finished up, and she loved it in Canada so much, all the snow, so she decided to come back and do her postdoc. And then we also have Dr. Rashida Bagchi. She's originally from India, and she came to Canada to do her PhD. And she did get her Canadian citizenship and then decided to try out the US for a little while. So she's actually working with me in Colorado now as well. So sorry, that was a very brief introduction, but I'm going to pass it off to them to tell us a little bit more about their journey and what they're kind of looking at for the future. Can start with you, Rashida.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Am I audible? Okay.
You're a little quiet.
Am I? Is this better? Okay. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Canadian Postdoc Fellows Association, for inviting me to be a panelist. I see some familiar names around, which is good. As Jen said, yes, I'm in Colorado right now. Originally did my bachelor's and master's from India, moved on to Canada, University of Manitoba, where I did my PhD studies. And then, like Jen said, I was interested in exploring the US because when you are in Canada and want to continue in academia, there's a big push for you to go abroad and get some training, preferably in a newer field, something that's aligned to your PhD, but again, that sets you apart from your PhD supervisor. So I did my PhD training in cardiovascular physiology and pathophysiology, working on transcription and cardiac pathology in general. I came to University of Colorado, Anschutz Medical Campus, and decided to work on metabolism, something I had never worked on before. But fortunately, I am in an environment which allows me to challenge myself, sometimes a bit too much. But that's what you do as a postdoc. You learn things, sometimes the hard way. It's most of the times for me that way. But I've had a wonderful opportunity of developing a new line of investigation in the laboratory and been in continuous conversation with my postdoc supervisor. And we've agreed that, this is something I can move ahead with, hopefully start my lab someday. But I definitely want to return to Canada. I love the culture there. I love the people there. I love the environment there. What I do miss here is a trainee-centered environment, and that is something actually I'm proud to have been part of in Canada, and I'm sure we can discuss more later.
Thanks, Rashida. Mara, you want to tell us a little bit more about you?
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It was really surprising. Thank you for the introduction as well. I'm gonna tell you guys a little bit of my background. So as Jen said, I'm from Brazil, and I did my undergrad studies there, most of my PhD studies there. And I had this opportunity of coming to Canada, doing part of my research during my PhD, and that lasted for a year. It was an amazing opportunity because in Brazil, we don't have a lot of funding. We don't have a lot of those opportunities. And I was really glad that I got invited here. And I loved Ottawa. I fell in love with the weather, with Canadians. So I finished my PhD over there, and I decided to come back here as a postdoc in the same lab as I did part of my research during my PhD. And right now, I'm not in the same field, and not in the same lab as I was when I came back to Canada. I decided to move from cardiovascular research to kidney research. So during my undergrad and PhD, I was playing with the interface. So we're studying cardiorenal disease. And then I got really good in immunology and cardiovascular diseases. and I felt like I was missing the kidney part. So now I'm in the Kidney Research Center, focusing more on acute kidney injury and chronic kidney disease.
All right, thank you. If anyone at any point wants to jump in and ask a question, feel free to either unmute yourself, show your face if you're so inclined, or you can also just write in a message, but otherwise, I'm just gonna keep bugging them with my questions. So I guess the next thing I'd like to ask, Rashida, I guess you can also speak to like your experience as an international in Canada as well, or the US or both. But what would you say like you found especially challenging, or maybe that you didn't expect about being an international PhD/postdoc?
This is interesting because my experience as an international trainee in Canada is quite different than an international trainee in the US, although both are parts of the same continent. Well, people who come from abroad to North America, I mean, just like anybody else or most people, definitely is a shock in not that much culturally, but more like how the system works. I was a very good student back in India, like, you know, first class marks all the time at the university. Studied 5 years of physiology, and then I come into the Department of Physiology, my first exam. I did not do great. And I was like, what the heck? I know this stuff better than anybody else. I can challenge people on these exams. But the way the things were designed were slightly different. So all I had to do, and now I'm speaking freely, but if you ask my supervisor, Dr. Mike Schubert, you know, when I started, I barely could talk to people. And he said, you know, go open your mouth. If you're thinking about something, if you think, you know, you can do better, go talk to the professor. And I did that. That person is the associate dean in the Faculty of Health Sciences. I sent him an email, and then I just stood outside his office. I'm like, hey, we need to figure this out, because what you've been teaching, I know everything. I just did not know how you wanted the answers delivered. So that was the first lesson I learned, that if you think about something, if you know you're good at something and things can be fixed, just go talk to people. Communication is key for everything, as we all know. So there it goes. If I had any problems, I would go to and talk to the person directly. I still do that. Sometimes doesn't come out the way I want it, but you know, you got to get the words across. So there was a lot more open line of communication with people, whether it was fellow graduate students in the lab, technicians, my own supervisor, my advisory committee. I felt very comfortable in that environment. I also spent a good chunk of my time just staying in the lab, like most graduate students do. But I also felt that as an international trainee, I was never pushed to the side and being made to think that, hey, you know what, you're international, you did not do your schooling here. It is challenging. You come from a different education system. It is definitely challenging. But if you're good, there are opportunities. And sometimes you just have to create opportunities for yourself. That is something that I've learned along the way. Moving to the US, I also talked to a lot of grad students. Jen knows very well. And it's interesting because her PhD supervisor did his graduate work at the institute where I did my graduate work. Years apart, of course, but we never met there. It's really a small world. My PhD supervisor was Jen's thesis external, and we came to know about that later when we met, which is so weird. But you know, these small connections that you can actually make in Canada, I have had a little bit of trouble doing that in US. It's a more restricted environment. And again, this is personally, there are networks, you know, through which you can grow. But as an international trainee, there are very limited opportunities. For example, take for, you know, the fellowship applications. For what I work on, I can apply to American Heart Association, maybe American Diabetes Association. And that too is restricted. If your supervisor is primarily not heavily invested in diabetes research, you cannot apply for funding. Fortunately, I had CIHR backing me up, applied for CIHR, didn't get it the first try, But yeah, then, I was successful. And that is a nice flexibility that federal agencies, at least I can speak for CIHR, that it provides for you to take a fellowship and go somewhere and do your work. You do not see that, a lot of that happening here. Again, from personal experience. The environment definitely is like a go, 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 get more data. I like fast-paced environments, but sometimes you just need to take a step back, and I have felt more burnt out here than I felt in Canada, to be very honest. And I guess we have to be honest with each other at this point. But again, if you are up for some challenge and want a change of environment, go travel, go explore another system. It's very important. It makes you, like rethink your perspectives, not just in life in general, but, about training. And again, it doesn't matter whether you go into academia or industry or science policy or anything. I totally believe that there's nothing called alternative career. Everything is a career. It is going to be up to you what kind of training you want. Some of us will be successful sooner. Some will take longer time, like me. But there is a vast difference from what I have seen in the training environment. There's pros and cons in both places. As a student, I felt very secure in the training environment in Canada, maybe also because of the university I was at. But at the same time, as postdoc in the US, I have this opportunity, to go out on my own and explore what's around me. Whether it comes to talking to people through postdoc association activities. Jen has been she was the president last year of the postdoc association here, and kind of dragged me into it. This year I'm the vice president, and this is not the greatest year to be leading anything, but hey, you know what? This is a challenging year and we'll do the best we can. But I would obviously say there's a difference, but what I have learned over time is to make the best out of what is offered to me. And if something is not offered to me, is there a way I can create an opportunity for myself?
Thanks, Rashida. Mara, have you had similar challenges or different challenges kind of to what Rashida said?
To be honest, doing research in Brazil, it's really hard. As I said, we don't have as many opportunities. We don't have a lot of money. And at some point, I even did some fridge science, because I would open the fridge and say, what do we have here? And what can I create with this? And when I came to Canada, I was like, wow, people are rich because we have so much money. We have everything we need within 2 days, you can get an antibody. So it wasn't all flowers, and I wasn't 100% happy and fulfilled all the time, but I'm definitely gonna say that it's easier to work here. And I feel like people are friendly, we have the opportunity of connecting. It's just easier, it flows better here in Canada. I don't have any problems, to be honest.
That's great. So I'll just say from my experience being in the United States, I mean, it's not quite, sorry, my daughter. Rox, I'm serious. Hi, Rashida. Okay, sorry guys. Hi, Rashida. The joys of having your kids home all day. Being in the US, I mean, it's not quite so different for me, having grown up in Canada and having exposure obviously to a lot of the same culture. I'd say one of the funny things that, I didn't think about is that people will assume that I am American, and sometimes, especially right now when I'm looking for jobs, it's kind of harder because people are like, oh, they tell me about this job that's here. And I'm like, no, I'm on a visa. I'm not allowed to stay here. And I'm not, I need to go back home. And I think that's kind of one of the funny things for me here. Speaking towards that too, Rashida, how would you say, like what have you encountered? Because I know that you are trying to come back to Canada soon and look for an academic position. And what would you say it's like while you're not at home trying to do this? And then on top of it during COVID.
Yeah, I mean, let's leave the COVID factor aside. It's not going to leave us anytime soon. It's hard because when you're in a particular place and applying for jobs in the same place, you can actually email people, I would say harass them sometimes, to go and meet and talk to them. It's hard when you're not in the same place, when you're away from the country as such. What I have tried and done over the past year or so, when I was able to travel, that's a long time, is before I would visit, because I live here, my husband lives in Winnipeg, and it's not fun. The last time I saw him was in January, and we don't know when we'll see each other again. It's not great. But whenever I have had a chance to go back, whether it's like, taking a few days off during Christmas or during spring, what I have done in the past is emailed people I would like to talk to, just to even get, a feedback of, or an understanding of where, things stand when it comes to like, hiring people in academia. And it's been interesting because sometimes I'm able to get meetings, sometimes not. So, there are people I do try and stay in touch with, and it's not just at one organization, it's more than one university. So of course you got to cast a wide net. But at the same time, what I have been getting most of the times, I've put in a few applications. I even got an interview, which I was like, wow, if this is even possible. And then I did not get any more interviews. What I have been told repeatedly is like, oh, you're great. Your CV looks great. This is awesome. And I'm like, why am I not getting a job? And then I see people who are like shortlisted for interviews, and I've been like, been in the top 5, but they would decide to interview only 3. So that's hard. It's heartbreaking actually, but what happens is a lot of those people are actually localites. So if you're any localite there and trying to look for a job, get on it. Because you have this opportunity of going and talking to people. Again, with COVID, it's different, but you're still a localite. And if you're looking for a job there, you just have to send an email, schedule a Zoom call. Everybody's doing Zoom calls these days. Pick up the phone and talk. Because that helps quite a bit. If not, it's not everything, but if you have a strong CV and you're able to utilize those local connections you have, it will go a long way. Trying to go back, I don't know how to put this, but the Canadian system, from what I have seen, so, 20 years ago, if you did a postdoc, I'm talking about the duration here, because that is a key factor now. Jen is smiling because she knows exactly what I'm talking about. If you did a 2-year, 3-year postdoc, you had like one, solid paper. Even if you did not base your career on that, you had people watching for you. It was easier to create positions. I'm talking strictly academia because that's what, at least for now, I still have hopes for. We'll see. I might just start a coffee shop at the end of the day, or work as a florist. I love flowers and I love to bake, so we'll see. But it used to be like, 3 years, 4 years. I just finished 5 years of my postdoc. Yes, the number of years is hard. Myra keeps smiling. This is wonderful. But to attain what I'm trying to get at, like, apparently in the US now, 6 years, 7 years, even 8 years of postdoc is normal. And what I have been told by some people of search committees is like, oh, you need more experience. I'm like, in terms of what? Like, what are you talking about? I've had 2 first author papers from here, very solid work. Working on my 3rd one, we'll see. That's a lot of work, and Jen has been like helping me quite a bit with that. And then I have maybe like 7 or 8 co-authored publications, and these are original articles. And in like really high impact journals, placed 3rd or 4th. So I have a good CV. It shows that I can work with people. It shows that I can diversify my research. I can help with techniques. I can help with finding mechanisms for things that people have no idea about. So I must be good at something. And then it keeps coming back and they're like, you need more experience. And I still don't understand what that experience is. Like, do they want like all of my hair to fall off? I mean, I'm losing quite a bit, but, or what? Or my teeth start falling off at this point? Like, what do I have to do to get that first job? Another tricky thing is when you see advertisements as assistant or associate professors. Of course, people want people with funding. Also, when it comes to assistant professors, a lot of these people who are applying are already assistant professors in another place, maybe on a tenure track or not on a tenure track. Tenure tracks are really hard to come by because as far as most Canadian universities work, your salary is paid by the university. In the US, it's very different because you write these ginormous size grants, and that's all you do because your salary comes off that grant. Universities over time will start investing in you, but it's not necessary that they will be paying your salary from the beginning. So it's been hard to like understand like what they're actually looking for. Your science is good, your outreach is good, your organizational skills are awesome. I have been on several national, international committees now in leadership positions. I have taught quite a bit. I actually was able to make a teaching dossier, which I did not think I will ever be able to do, which is amazing. And apparently I'm a decent mentor because, you know, people like Jen keep nominating me for things. So I must have done something good. But again, you present to them the whole package and they still tell you, you need experience. So I'm still having hard time coming to terms with that. What I have done during these COVID days is been very depressed about not finding enough positions to apply for as others. But there are positions starting to surface now, which shows that, you know, again, the universities are starting to invest in bringing people back or hiring, as they call, fresh blood. I think it's just, you know, wait and watch and see what comes your way. But what I have changed now is the way I interact with people. I have become more aggressive about emailing people. Sometimes, you know, walking up to some professor here and saying, hey, do you know somebody in Canada? Because that's another problem. Most people here don't know people in Canada. People in Canada don't know people in US. So there's a huge disconnect there. But there are like, you know, smaller connections in the field that you can absolutely use. And I have started sending out my CVs to professors here and be like, can you send this to somebody you know? And that actually helps getting feedback on your CV, on the research plan, and also more or less about where you should apply if there will be positions coming up in the next 6 months that I should watch out for. But definitely go talk to people. If you're a localite, you stand higher chances than me for getting a job. I highly recommend that you pick up the phone or write that email and say, hey, I just want to discuss my prospects at the institute.
All right, thank you, Rashida. Myra, maybe you can give us another perspective as well. What's it like being a non-citizen? I think you told me you just got your green card, so woohoo! But what's it like being a non-citizen trying to plan your future in Canada?
Just gonna make a comment on what Rashida said. I was smiling because I went to the seminar and they were giving hints how to get a position of like teaching and research. And they said the average number of years you need to get this position is like 7 or 8 years of postdoc. And then at least 3 or 4 papers, like very good papers, one in Nature or Science Cell. And I kept looking at that slide and thinking, I'm gonna open a bakery or I'm gonna sell coconut water in the beach, as I said, in Brazil. It's nearly impossible to get that like good of a CV, especially in my case, like coming from Brazil. That
Myra, we should talk about a business plan.
We should. I'm down. But looking at the side of me being a foreign in Canada, trying to apply for other positions, job, it's really hard when you are in a work permit. That's my situation right now. So when I came here, I came with an employer-specific work permit. If something happened in the lab or I wasn't happy with the situation, I couldn't leave unless I would reapply to another visa, another permit. That made my life quite difficult because I thought about leaving my first postdoc a few times and I couldn't because I would have to wait 3 or 4 months to get another visa. And currently what I did was I applied to the permanent residency, and that gives me a little bit more of stability. So once I get the permanent residency, I can start looking for jobs in other fields and not only academia. That's another issue too. If you're coming from Brazil, I don't know if it's all the other countries work the same, but if you're coming from Brazil, you can only work in academia or postdoctoral or teaching positions if you have this type of work permit.
When you have a permanent residency, do you feel like you will have the same opportunities as someone who has citizenship? I have no idea.
I would think so. There's no restrictions, at least for what I heard. As long as you hold a PR, it's about the same as you being a citizen. The only thing a permanent resident can do is vote. It's a plus.
Yes, I really wish that I could vote here in the US in about a month, but not gonna happen. Here, let's switch gears a little bit here. Rashida or Myra, is there anything that you would say that Canada could benefit from either talking about Brazil or India or the US? I mean, I know we all seem to be kind of biased that Canada's great, but we're not perfect. Is there anything, especially like in terms of research or the way academic institutions are run, that you wish that we could improve? Maybe to be more like some other place?
I think what has been a challenge in Canada as well as here, and I got like, a little bit of the previous discussion that was going on in the previous session. Teaching opportunities is one thing that postdocs usually don't get a lot, and it's a problem here as well, especially for somebody like me and Jen who are on a medical campus. You do not have undergrad students here, so you're very limited in teaching opportunities. And you get to know about them maybe through emails, but mostly through word of mouth. Fortunately, I have been able to connect with people who teach. So they will be like, oh, I have this class. Do you want to co-teach with me? And you just, add that extra line on your CV now that you've like co-lectured or lectured a class. And I think if that is something that can be integrated into more of a structured postdoc training program at Canadian universities, I think that will help a lot. Because a lot of the people after their PhDs, they want to do a couple of years of bench work and then somehow just like, they just enjoy teaching, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some of them are really good teachers and they want to just get that experience and go into teaching. I think it will help a big deal. The other thing would be pushing on professional development programs. Project management is key. Honestly, like none of us are taught, whether you stay in academia or not, we are never taught how to work with people. And that sucks. I can say especially in the US. But because, people come in from so many different places, we have very different mindsets. We function differently. We are like 5 fingers on a hand. We are never going to be the same. But we have to learn to work with each other, play on each other's strengths, and, help overcome those weaknesses. And it's hard, and be organized at the same time. So I think those, pushing on those professional development programs and at least bringing in some aspects where you make it mandatory for postdocs to go through that training. To be very honest, PIs need that training. We know people who've been running their labs for 20, 30 years, they need that training too. Well, they did not have that opportunity, it's okay, but we do. So even come up as like, small groups, as whether you're a postdoc association or not, and try bringing in these programs. And this is actually one of the best times to do it, to be very honest. Yes, most of it will be online. There's nothing you can do about it. But this is a great opportunity, that unfortunately COVID has brought us, but we'll be fortunate to make the most of our time that way. US universities do invest in postdoc development programs. Again, it's not mandatory, or it's pretty voluntary, but that is something I have seen surface a lot here compared to Canadian universities, and I think we can benefit a huge deal. The work environment is in Canada, like Jen said, yeah, I'm biased, but to be very honest, I've seen like both sides now. I'm dying to go back to Canada because of also a lot of other reasons. And no, I am not sad that I can't vote here in November, to be very honest. But I think, some of those smaller things, if we can make tweaks into the current scenario that's there for postdocs, it will make the postdoc community way more stronger, way more resilient, to be very honest. So in times like these, there's always something to fall back on. And something like project management, it doesn't have to be a formal training. It could be just some basic organizational skills courses offered to postdocs for either a small fee, better if it's free. Help them gain confidence that they are able to do these things. The good thing is when you apply for a job, whatever job that is, you can say you've been through this training. It makes you think differently because you'll realize through your training that you've actually done a lot of these, you've exercised a lot of these skills in your own daily work. And now you're able to pitch it accordingly. So if somebody says, have you done budgeting? Well, yeah, I am very careful about what I order. When I write grants, I do my own budget. So you know how to budget, clearly. So now you have evidence, but now with this training, it teaches you how to market yourself better as well. So marketing ourselves is something people don't teach us, but if those are some of the skill sets, if that can be integrated into training programs, I think postdocs would benefit a big deal from that.
I definitely agree with that. And I was lucky when I started doing my research. It was second year undergrad. And my supervisor was also starting her lab. So we did everything together from scratch. All the budgeting, all like the purchasing, organizing lab, and all the techniques. And I feel like that's missing in a lot of the postdocs background. I remember one professor that recently got into Waterloo, and she was saying exactly that. First day in her lab, she had no idea of like what to do. How do I place the order for this? How do I budget this? She had absolutely no idea. So that's missing for sure. And I would say this is more general, but in Brazil, the postdocs have more independency. They do separate projects. I don't know if it's just my lab or those experiences I had here, but we're often being told what to do, and we don't get to be that creative and exercise that part, because the next step is getting our own labs, getting our own careers going. And we don't have the experience because there's always someone sort of guiding us towards where we need to go. So that's something that could be different too.
That's really interesting. I do want to acknowledge we're just a little bit over time, but both of the speakers have very graciously said they would stay an extra couple minutes since, I don't know, I'm enjoying the conversation. I would like to say one thing that I think that I think the US is doing well is that at least most of the major universities here seem to follow the National Institute of Health guidelines for paying their postdocs. And I don't know exactly what the results of the survey was about, like the average income that Christine was talking about, but I know here, like most postdocs would be making now, I believe the minimum has gone up to like $52,000 a year, which, I mean, maybe if you're in San Francisco or New York City, that probably isn't enough, but in a lot of American cities, that's, again, not like we're rolling in the dough or anything, but a little bit more comfortable than I know what's happening in some Canadian cities. I know Ottawa U, a couple of years ago when I graduated, the minimum was only $34,000, which, I mean, like you could go work at McDonald's and probably make the same amount of money if you worked hard enough. So, oh, Christine's just saying that it's 45 to 50 is the median in Canada. So I would say that in the United States, it's probably a little bit higher. And not every institution follows the guidelines, but I'd say it's pretty well followed to an extent. And there is, based on experience, other guidelines to get salary increases every year. So that's one thing that I really hope that that's something that we could get our institutions like CIHR and NSERC kind of stepping up to the plate. I mean, they can't tell people, yeah, you have to pay them this amount, but their guidelines and the way they word things, I think, does have a strong impact. So that's one thing I would kind of like us to do similarly to the US, not take away our health insurance. So does anyone watching have anything that they wanted to ask or even mention maybe about their own experience? I don't know if we have some other international postdocs here as well. Feel free. Okay, maybe I will just finish up here then really quick to wrap it up. Question is to both of you. Would you recommend, like if you were talking to a PhD student that's like, oh, I want to go do a postdoc abroad, would you recommend it, or what advice would you give them? Even, you know, kind of generally speaking, but also since we know COVID-19, like Rashida said, isn't going away anytime soon. No one wants to take it.
Yeah, I'll take it. That's fine. That's what I do usually. Yes, travel is hard, but to be very honest, if you want to enrich your training experience, take the leap of faith and go for it. Because there's no better way to find out what you like or what you don't like without actually experiencing it. Personally, whether it's grad studies in Canada or postdoc experience here, you know, when I get a chance to open my lab, I don't know how I'm going to do a lot of things, but I definitely know what I'm not going to do. And that would not have been possible if I hadn't trained in 3 different countries. Very different training environments, a very different approach to trainees, very different approach to science in general. And I mean, with COVID, gosh, I don't even know if science exists anymore. But yes, COVID is real. Let me tell you that. People are dying, people are suffering. Travel is, do not travel unless you absolutely have to. Do not get on a flight. But again, for the training experience, if you have somebody who says, hey, you know what, in a month you can start in my lab as a postdoc or a junior faculty or something, definitely go for it. Even if you spend just a year and maybe like in 6 months, you'll know you don't like it. It's okay. It's absolutely okay. Either you will fight it and make the most of it, or you'll say, hey, you know, I'm done. I'm going to find something else. And that is okay too. But just take that leap of faith. I did. I'm away from family. My parents are in India. The last time I saw them was 4 years ago. That's definitely not fun. Like I said, my husband, I don't know when I'll see him again. We joke about like, someday we'll get on this like, you know, hypothetical flight, maybe. But I wouldn't, you know, take away this experience from me. If I did not have this experience, if I did not have, at this point, it's almost a luxury finding a postdoc position in another place where you can actually travel to. So if you have that luxury, go for it. That's all I would say.
Yeah. I always tell my friends that they should come, or either like go to the US or other countries. I speak for experience that when I came here the first time, I had a very limited view of life in general. And when I came here, it changed me in a way. When I went back, I brought all this experience with me. And I'm pretty sure the lab runs better today in several aspects in Brazil because I brought this experience. And a lot of my colleagues that went abroad as well, they went back, and all those pieces and bits, they made a better laboratory for sure. It's not easy, as you said, being away from family, being in a different environment. I had to adapt a lot because cultures are really different. But today, I really enjoy the culture. It's part of me. I call myself Canadian already. And in the beginning, it's really hard, and you have to be in a good place. You have to be careful with your mental health for sure. It's all the changes. Everything is new. It's usually a different language. You have to adapt a lot, but it's really worth it. It's really worth it.
Thank you both so much. And I'm happy that you are both feeling positive about your experiences. I mean, of course, everywhere it's not always going up on the roller coaster, especially right now during COVID. But I'm happy to hear that you're both enjoying and growing a lot from your experiences. So with that, if anyone has any questions, speak up really quickly. Otherwise, I would like to thank Rashida and Myra for sharing their experiences with us. And of course, thank you to CAPS for putting on this seminar and all the other great seminars that have passed and a few more that are coming up in the next couple days. So thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, hopefully we'll see everyone at CAPS tomorrow. Thanks, guys.